Welcome at the Summary Club, and today we continue our series of videos about dreamers, dreams and how to learn how to dream so that it leads you only forward to new successes and achievements. And today I would like to say a few words about those for whom physical limitations have not become a barrier to the fulfillment of dreams, about the stories of people with disabilities who have achieved success. The story of the first blind pilot. One such example of disabled people succeeding in their own right is Miles Hilton Barber, the world's first blind pilot. His arduous journey to his dream is, in my opinion, a vivid illustration of how sometimes it is necessary to break the vicious circle of limited perceptions that hold back our inner powers, not allowing them to break through and create their reality. Miles Hilton Barber was born into a family of pilots 1948, Zimbabwe, and when he grew up he decided to follow in his father's footsteps. He tries to enter a flight school, but fails the medical exam for his eyesight. And 3 years later he receives the terrible news that due to a genetic predisposition he will soon go blind. And so it happened. By the age of 30, Miles lost his sight completely. Start with a dream. It is difficult to imagine what was going on in his soul. A man in full bloom was cut off from a full life, and the path to his dream, as it seemed to him at the time, was forever closed. Miles moved to England, where he worked at the Royal National Institute for the Blind. Thinking back to that time, he admits that he was afraid to walk 400 meters to the nearest supermarket for a loaf of bread. The example of his younger brother Jeff made him radically reconsider his approach to life. He was blind too, but it did not stop him from achieving his goals, and he managed to sail alone from Africa to Australia. It was Jeff who managed to instill in Miles the idea that if you want to succeed in life, don't start with being blind, start with what you want to do most in life. With your dreams. Miles, who was by then 50 years old, returned to his youthful dream of becoming a pilot. When he tried to take the training, he was first told, "How can you do that? You're blind." To which he replied, "So what? All civil aviation pilots are taught to fly blind, and I am already blind. Already fit for the profession." Since then a new life began for Miles. He began to participate in sports adventures that not every healthy person would dare, let alone the blind, such as marathoning, running, rock climbing, and flying in small planes. He has many accomplishments to his credit, such as a marathon across the Sahara, conquering Mount Kilimanjaro, marathons in China and Siberia, and much more. In 2003 he became the first blind pilot to fly across the English Channel in a passenger plane. And by his personal example, he inspires many people around the world to do what they dream of and not let circumstances hold them back. The lesson of this amazing story, in my opinion, is that when you really want something, you should not sit and wait for circumstances to change for the better, but just go and act. After all, as Miles himself admitted, he used to think that if God or medical technology cured him of his blindness, then he would have dreams again and he would begin to really live. However, he could have waited his whole life for that, but fortunately he did not. And this is a good example for those who think they can achieve something when, for example, the economic situation or anything else in the outside world changes for the better. But, as you know, water won't flow under a lying stone, and as Miles himself admits, with that attitude I would still be sitting at home, like a couch vegetable. You always have to start with yourself, because when we change ourselves, the world around us changes too. If you want to achieve something in life, start with your dreams, not your circumstances. When was the last time you did something for the first time in your life? It was the last time you grew as a person. Life is not measured by the number of breaths and exhales, but by the events that take our breath away. Don't be afraid to find yourself in a place that takes your breath away. Miles Hilton Barber. And these words, of course, are relevant not only to those who suffer from any physical disabilities, but to any of us. It often happens in the life of any of us that on the way to the cherished dream there are obstacles that seem insurmountable, and you suddenly involuntarily begin to think that no, I will never achieve it. However, if your desire is really strong, then such obstacles can be perceived as a kind of challenge of fate, a kind of test, as if some higher power is checking if you really want what you are striving for. At the heart of every difficulty lies an opportunity, Albert Einstein once said. In this connection, I would like to recall another story that can also serve as a vivid example of the fact that even a physical handicap is not an obstacle to one's dreams and that one should never be afraid to do something that no one has ever done before. Blind doctor. David Hartman became blind when he was 8 years old. He had a dream of becoming a doctor, but the Temple University School of Medicine told him that there were no blind graduates. David didn't let that stop him. He bravely accepted the challenge of fate and began to study from audio recordings, and he had the recordings of 25 medical textbooks. And so, at the age of 27, David became the first blind graduate of medical school. Such examples, of course, bring to mind the strength of spirit that is inherent in all of us, which is able to overcome any difficulties and find a way out of seemingly dead-end situations. After all, when you see the example of someone who, suffering from some kind of physical disability, still managed to achieve his goal, you involuntarily feel that you too can do everything because you, unlike him, have no restrictions and you are healthy and able to do absolutely everything you want. In this connection, another striking example comes to mind, the Colombian artist Zuli Sanguino. Her paintings are very talented, full of light and life, and carry such a flow of positive energy that when you look at them, you do not think about the fact that their creator suffers from a congenital pathology. She has underdeveloped limbs, in fact, no arms and legs, and she draws with a brush in her teeth. The life story of this girl, an artist with disabilities, is another vivid example of the fact that our spirit is stronger than any disability, and even if the disability is insurmountable, it cannot be an obstacle to the fulfillment of a cherished dream. But before Zuli became the person she is today, she had a lot of trials. She was born with phocomelia and seemed destined to be bedridden for life. However, her mother did not want to put up with it and made an enormous effort to teach her daughter to sit and even walk on her own. The family lived in poverty. Their home was a simple shack with a dirt floor, but mother and daughter persevered. Another problem they faced was the aggression of the father, who was abusive and often raised his hand against his wife and children. Eventually, he committed suicide, which was the cause of the girl's years of depression. It seemed that she would never want to work on her own body again. Her mother had to work hard to give her daughter back the joy of life. She taught Zuli to write and draw, and the girl gradually realized her purpose and found her purpose in life. At 15, she realized that she wanted to dedicate herself to drawing, that it was worth living for, and she made a tremendous effort to master the basics of painting. The ability to embody the world on paper has been suffered through blood and sweat, but since then she has had a new, bright streak. She realized her purpose, to give people light and joy through her painting. And when you seek to bring joy to someone, your own suffering takes second place, and you see, feel, first of all, the beautiful in yourself and in the world around you.
Subscribe to the Summary Club and watch short versions of the most popular and useful videos every day.
Now Zuli is 24 years old, and she has learned to do almost everything on her own. She dresses herself, puts on makeup, mops the floors and, of course, draws. In addition, she takes an active part in environmental initiatives. Together with her brothers and sisters, she regularly collects trash in her neighborhood and in her free time helps her mother with her younger children or babysits her neighbors' babies. Moreover, she gives motivational lectures in private firms, schools, and even prisons. Of course, unlike most of us, she has to overcome herself every day in the face of her own physical limitations, and what for us is a simple action is for her a small feat, but her example makes it clearer that when we show strength of mind, we can overcome anything. The human spirit cannot be paralyzed. You are breathing, so you can dream. M. Brown. And there are many more examples of famous people who have accepted the challenge of fate and achieved remarkable success while having disabilities and other abnormalities of a healthy physical body. John Milton, the famous poet and writer, was blind. Itzhak Perlman, the famous world-class violinist, is a lower body palsy. James Thurber, cartoonist and humorist, had very poor eyesight. Heather Whiston, Miss America '94, is deaf. Reifer Johnson, the decathlon champion, was born with a crippled foot. Edward Goldernes, a Russian poet and translator who lived in Georgia, was terminally ill from the age of 15. But at the same time, as his beloved woman recalls, "I have never seen a more heroic restless destiny around me." It was not only that he was a poet, writing sonnets, translating, he was making the connection between man and man. He was creating new higher forms of human communication. He was ennobling those who lived close to him. And this list could go on. After all, the main thing that unites all these people is strength and fortitude, the ability not to put up with circumstances, to live and create, embodying their cherished desires. Live sincerely and you will achieve everything in spite of limitations. Destiny is not given to man from the outside, but every day it matures in his heart, said the famous Buddhist philosopher Daisaku Ikeda. In other words, any of us creates our own destiny every day, carefully growing it like a sprout from a seed. After all, what you put in you, that's what eventually germinates. And the examples of those we talked about can be a vivid confirmation of this thought, that each of us, after all, is the creator of our own destiny, and from any, even the most dead-end situation there is a way out when you know what you are striving for. It is people with disabilities, either from birth or as a result of accidents, who teach us to appreciate what we have and to discover the possibilities that God has given us. After all, as Vera Kotelinets, a Russian who was born without hands and learned to do everything with her feet, including taking care of children, says, "When I hear someone complain about life, I think, I wish I had your hands, I would have turned the world upside down with them." There is nothing to add to this, as they say. Stop complaining that you do not have enough money or good acquaintances, because if you start to live sincerely, improve yourself and every day, to make at least a small step in the direction of your destination and what you love most, to your dream, then soon between your happiness and you will not remain any barriers and you can achieve everything that you wish, despite any physical or material restrictions, which I wish you. And friend, don't forget to subscribe to the Summary Club for becoming more successful, educated, kinder and wiser every day. Save hundreds of hours and dollars spending on boring regular education. Feel free to write your opinions and questions about each video. We read all the comments. In addition, go to our official website where you can find reading materials or watch other videos on channel and links in the description. All the best.